Jesus is about to have one of the worst kind of weeks ever in his short and fiery life and ministry. The struggle is real, the outcome not totally known except in hindsight, and he is on a path of self destruction. If he keeps going at the rate he is, pushing the revolution and talking about a shift from the earthly kingdom to a heavenly kingdom, and people talking about him being the king of the Jews, he is really, really going to upset those in power and endanger his life. As I was pondering what to say about this Christian holy day, there were three thoughts that kept popping up for me. One, even though most of us in this congregation might not identify as Christian, it is important that we understand the influence our culture has had from the Christian message. And two, that if we look into who Jesus was as a teacher and a preacher and a healer and a prophet and a rebel rouser, and the many lessons that we learned from him to tend the hungry, to care for the outcasts, the imprisoned, the poor. Well, his struggles and the way that he approached life, his life, can really help us to look at our own spiritual development. And lastly, those writing history always have a particular story they want us to hear. They tell it slant, as Maya Angelou was fond of saying. I much prefer to dig deeper and wider and explore lots of avenues, and often I come up with a story that is maybe more interesting and inclusive and engaging. So I never want us to forget that the Bible is one big history story, and the New Testament is mainly a biography of that man named Jesus, his birth, his death, and all the actions, hopes, dreams, mistakes, relationships, and his struggles to reform his religion and confront the systems of oppression and abuse of power. He was a rabble rouser. Now, there are personal struggles we engage in as we strive to do the right thing, and the struggles we engage in to overcome adversities, struggles to overcome deep loss, and sometimes struggles that just result in trying to keep one foot in front of the other to keep on keeping on. Struggle is that strenuous effort to progress despite difficulties. And there are serious and weighty public struggles, such as trying to make meaning out of the social, cultural happenings like a coronavirus that has killed millions worldwide, and a virus that has brought us to our knees for both prayer and sometimes by defeat. Racism and oppression and poverty and immigration, and how to deal with that insurrection, oh, by the way, that happened on January 6th, and the devastating effects of a culture that has hate and violence seeming at its core some days, and the divisiveness that permeates our political landscape. And now it's true that it's inevitable as we go through life. What an odd concept that is. Go through life. What would sound better? As we live through life, as we bound through life, as we crawl through life, as we march through life, as we learn through life? I don't have an answer today, and I guess it isn't needed. But anyways, as we live through life, it is inevitable that we are going to be scarred by struggle. There are going to be events that wound us and injure us and that have to heal and that leave a mark on us. And I would not want it any other way. Who among you has no scar, visible or invisible, that has not made you stronger, wiser, more spirited, more courageous, perhaps more wary, but nonetheless a survivor as we go through life. I have a scar on my forehead. It's not very large, but I remember exactly how I got it. I was in early teens and I wanted to go out with friends that I knew my parents would disapprove of. So I did what any foolish 14-year-old would do. I lied to my parents about where and whom I was going out with. Of course, I got caught. And I thought my folks were being unreasonable when they put me under house arrest. Well, maybe not really, but they grounded me for a while. And so I went in the garage to work with my Grampy Faye and to try to talk with him about my parents. I hoped he would help me discover why they were being so unreasonable and not letting me hang around with who I wanted to hang around. I was hoping he'd be on my side. And as we were working on a truck that he was repairing, we were talking about the kind of friends that the adults in my life thought I should have, the type of character traits I should develop, and the expectations from my learning and experiencing to do the right things with the right people at the right time. We were engaged deeply in conversation when suddenly the vehicle we were working on lurched forward a couple of inches and the hood lock nicked my forehead, causing a bloody wound. Now, it isn't often when going through life, or maybe it's in yours, but not in mine, when actual struggles, such as what are friends, what's character, and what is expected from me, results in a wound that is scarred over, but really is very visible, serving as a visible reminder of some very deep conversations. I'm like you, I have other scars and lingering signs of damage from life events that I have struggled with, events that I sometimes had a choice in engaging in, and sometimes events that occurred in my life that I absolutely had no choice except how I was going to heal from them. Hopefully, healing occurs rather than scar tissue covering over festering sores. Oh, from each event of suffering, a story can be told. And the New Testament is no exception to that. The authors of the New Testament and many authors, such as Elaine Pagels, A.N. Wilson, and others, have chosen to tell the story of Jesus' suffering from a particular perspective. Each has a slant on how they want us to hear it, believe it, and apply it in our lives. And I, too, have a perspective as well. My perspective on suffering, struggle of Jesus, is going to be different from others who define themselves as believers in the saving nature of the crucifixion. I like Palm Sunday. Within the Lenten and Easter season, I like it the best. It is a day that signifies the choices that Jesus made, choices that sealed his fate. He didn't turn back. He made choices. And in that gospel narrative, Jesus is preparing to enter Jerusalem. It is a holy time in the city, and he had been a source of much trouble to both the Sanhedrin Jewish leaders and more particularly to the Roman rulers. He had created quite a stir, bringing a radically new message and approach that would stand, in fact, did stand religion right on its head. Entering Jerusalem was a choice he made, and he was determined to confront and to struggle against all that he thought was wrong in that society and religion at that time. The Roman society he was confronting included the way people were being oppressed. Remember, he hung out with those who were oppressed. He knew their suffering, he knew their stories. And he was also upset that the way some religious rulers had become oppressors also. Now, the townspeople, one would have us believe from the story, placed palm branches down on the ground as Jesus entered the city, treating him as royalty, as a king. The crowd is gathered as the humble Jesus enters the city on an ass, not regally on a horse, as the pride-filled Roman leaders are entering the city gates at the opposite end of town at the same time. Or now it is just before Passover, and the number of people coming to worship in Jerusalem at the temple is rising and swelling day by day. And the tensions are heightening, and the last thing anybody wants is a ragtag gang and a radical reformer running around getting everybody all whipped up about a new way of being, a new kingdom. It's quite a display. The crowds are gathering and they're cheering him on and they're urging him on and they're applauding and they're alleluias, or so the writers of the New Testament story would have us believe, as Jesus came into the city for that last week. But there's an aspect of the story that nags me, however. The writers of the story would have us see that there were masses greeting and gathering and welcoming Jesus as the king, and they were there to cheer him on. Yet when that week is over, there will be very few who will be by his side, and even fewer will be with him during his struggle till death. Mary, his mother, Mary Magdalene, Simone, few of the other women that followed them around, his brother James, and Simon of Cyrene, who supposedly was the man who assisted Jesus in carrying his cross. Well, they're the only persons left present during the 12 hours between his capture and his crucifixion. For me, that's a reminder of how challenging it is to remain compassionate and present with others during their times of trouble. And it also is a reminder that you never, never doubt that your presence with another who suffers isn't much appreciated and noted. The whole story about Jesus coming in and Palm Sunday is a passion play, and that was an ancient way to show events in Jesus's life. In fact, some of you remember walking the Stations of the Cross during Lent. That's your own personal passion play. Passion plays are based on the gospel stories. Now, remember, there's no verifiable historical written accounts of Jesus's life and death, and even the earliest gospel, the book of Mark, was written 30 to 40 years after his death. Yet stories about his death and his life permeate our culture and are the basis for all of the Christian belief and religion. A story must be told, and all gospel writers had a particular perspective to advance. Each of the gospel stories, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were fashioned in part after Mark, but not all gospel stories are consistent. For example, if you go back and read some of them, the accusation comes at night. In other stories, it comes in the morning. And there is a trial at the high priest's house with masses of people there. There is a trial with only the high priest there. The suggestion to release Barabbas comes from Pilate or from the people. All of Jesus's garments are torn apart, or the tunic is claimed whole by casting lots. And the story about Judas. Did he regret what he did and then commit suicide? Is it true that he had any part of this at all? And then Pilate's hand washing. Oh, there's so many stories, and they all different from gospel to gospel. But to have a good story, we don't always have to have all the facts, do we? And good storytellers can choose which parts to enhance or display or downplay, to report on, to portray or not, in order to advance a plot and shape a reaction. The thing, though, to remember is that with all New Testament authors, they had the same purpose, and that was to make believers out of non-believers and to strengthen those believers' convictions. A great story about struggle, about pushing on, about making choices, about the risk of being a rabble-rouser. Great stories. Now, for me, the purpose or a purpose of a story is to learn lessons, oftentimes through others' experiences, their sharings. I can learn how to engage and emerge from struggles of living, of life, of getting through life, scarred, yet wholly, healthy, and spiritually stronger. And we need the help of others to do that. Out of that solitary suffering, we need to come out of that. We need to come out of our silent suffering, and we need to reach out to others. And remember that though the whole throng leading and cheering Jesus on weren't there, there were people that was behind him and beside him, and even an absolute stranger who helped him to carry a burden. So I believe it's a positive thing that each of us is scarred by struggle. And I think it is a positive thing that we can work through, live through, learn through, and most importantly, we can help each other through suffering by just being there, by just being here. Struggle, as one religious person wrote, is an unsparing lesson, but a necessary gift. It is not a gift that we at first sight want, but facing struggle gives us the gift of making the choice of whether to crumble or be brave. And now, braving it does not mean that we suffer strong and silent, but that we engage in the process to learn about ourselves, about the value of living, and the valuable things that are worth loving in our life. These valuable things, people, and places where we can go to feel safe, to dispel our gloom, and to share with others, knowing that we will be held in loving and compassionate care. I hope and I pray that here at South Church, you feel upheld in love and compassion, and that the strength of all of us is united for a common purpose to love the world and all in it, even those who were rabble rousers, even though you might be a troublemaker, even though you might be a prophet, even though you are always, always welcome here, and I will be with you, no matter what your struggles are. May it be so. Blessings.